Hello, Bible readers. Psalm 22. I've been looking forward to this one. Every year on Maundy Thursday, the day before Good Friday, when the church remembers the death of Jesus, at the church where I serve at First Lutheran, end worship by reading the 22nd Psalm. I inherited a tradition of reading this psalm while a dramatic classical music piece plays underneath me. And what I added years ago was the shrouding of all things in our sanctuary that remind us of the action, the presence of God. And so we cover our huge Good Shepherd window that everybody is typically looking at for comfort during worship. We cover that whole window with a big black sheet. We cover the lectern where the word is read and the pulpit where the word is preached. We cover the altar table where the meal is shared, and we even cover the font where God claims us as God's very own child. Every year, we leave our worship space with a dark, heavy, shrouded feeling. Does God feel absent from us? I'm not sure I'd go that far, but there is certainly a distance that can be felt. And the reason we do that is because that's what's going on in Psalm 22. In both Matthew and Mark's Gospels, Jesus quotes verse 1 of Psalm 22 as the last thing he says, because it is the perfect prayer for a righteous sufferer experiencing the abandonment of God. By now, we're familiar with the lament psalm structure. It begins with a statement of deep intimacy, this lament psalm. My God, which is, it's actually deeply ironic, isn't it? Because as intimate as this way of addressing God is, I mean, just think, the Hebrew word for God, I've mentioned this before, is something like a breath, like Yahweh. So think of saying, my Yahweh, twice, and it's a very intimate way to call upon God. But what the psalmist has to say in this intimate way is, why have you forsaken me? Like, we just can't overlook the power of this very first line and what it reveals about the psalmist and the psalmist's relationship with God. It is at the heart, this first line, of what is the genius of the Psalms. I think it gets wrapped up by this one verse. It's this possessive term of endearment, term of love. And then what follows it up is, but how are you so cruel? In verses 3 to 21, there are moments of the psalmist trying to motivate God into action, moments of complaint about the enemies surrounding him, and moments of just plain old begging. In a prayer, we'd call them petitions. Verse 11 is that first and most important petition, do not be far from me. See, the idea here is rooted in temple theology that we've been talking about in the first book of Psalms. There's a theology in the part of the Psalter that we've been looking at that if God was close, if God was not detached from my world or my life, then this trouble that I'm experiencing would not have happened, right? So, my God, be not far from me. God is not the one causing the misery of the psalmist. God's absence simply allows for it to run rampant. And so it's not like the psalmist has anywhere else they can go, like some competing God or some other comfort. Come quickly, deliver me, save me. These are the petitions. And then mid-verse, just halfway into the 21st verse, everything changes. It could not be more abrupt. Is this where a divine oracle of assurance would have been uttered in response to those first 20 and a half verses? I've spoken of these in previous posts. Words of assurance to remind us God is good and God is present and God is active, has been in the past and is again now. And maybe something like that was said and then the rest of the psalm would be said. Perhaps that's how it was used originally. whether or not an outside text was used to help the psalm move from beginning to the end of verse 21, a change happens for sure, right? And the point is, God turns death and all that is the first 20 and a half verses to life, and all that is to finish this psalm, from desperation to praise. And what happens in the praise part of this psalm, the rest of the psalm, is that the psalmist, and this is amazing, the psalmist first tells the good news to a pretty small group of people, my brothers, meaning my family, those closest to me, then the assembly, then the great congregation, then those who seek the Lord, including all the families of nations. So not just Jews at this point. This psalmist is getting expansive. And then finally in verses 29 to 31, and this is where the poet was just trying to, like, how do I say this, right? In verses 29 to 31, we hear of all those already dead and those not yet born. So as my Brueggemann and Bellinger commentary says, the sweep of praise and gratitude is as all-inclusive as the poet can possibly imagine. So what begins with abandonment ends with thanksgiving and praise. The entire human community in this psalm, even those who are dead and those who are not yet born, are brought before God through this prayer to say together, no one, not even creation itself, is left by God to suffer on their own. God, not the circumstances of this life, of this world, God constitutes reality. What is finally and totally real and true. In other words, goodness is stronger than evil. No wonder then that Jesus, with his last dying breath, would put himself in the presence of God through this prayer that starts with abandonment, true to the moment Jesus was experiencing, but he knew it was not all there was, just as there was more to the psalm he was quoting. It really is among the most genius of moments in the entire Bible, in the entire story of God, in the entire story of our faith, and how we can share who and how our God is. Wish I could preach Maundy Thursday tomorrow. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.